Nice Voice, of course, takes into account the language selected in Configurator. The first release of Nice Voice with 8.9 in December 2024 is English US, which is selectable in Configurator V2, System tab, Language, English-US. While English GB and English AU are currently accessible, giving you speech-to-text and text-to-speech for their respective regions, or NLP, or Natural Language Processing, is currently optimized for US English. Additional languages and regional accommodations will be made in future updates. Speaking of updates, the voice definitions, which handle utterance and action variations, are separate from core updates and will be available like other firmware updates on the platform. You'll receive a notification in Management Cloud about the update, launch into Configurator V2, and install the update with the push of a button. Just go to Config V2, Interface tab, Nice Voice, Update Definitions. To help provide context to voice input devices, the HR40s and the ITPs, the installer should assign default locations for these devices in Configurator. When voice commands are issued without a location mentioned, Nice Voice first looks at the current input device location, so setting a viewer device location is quite important. On the ITP in the Config V2 Interface tab, set the location, set the media default zone, set the flyout default zone. The HR40s are multi-zone, allowing you to use wherever you like. So context for the location is derived from whatever media zone the HR40 has currently selected. To set the default media zones on HR40s, go to Config V2, Interface, select the HR40, Layout, Media, Default Zone. And for the HR40, you also want to set Behavior Default Zone on Cradle. As mentioned, context is derived in part from your voice input device location, your ITPs, your HR40s, but you also need to make sure your devices, your lights, thermostats, media sources, and so on, are configured for their physical locations. In the Lighting tab, you just need to set the location for each node. Remember, in Config V2, you can multi-select, right-click to set the locations of multiple nodes at once. In CoreOS 8.9, we added lighting classifications to allow one to address devices as an end user might address them. So an end user is not required to know the display name of every node. They can just call out a device class and a location or a display name. As an example, turn on the sconces in the living room. But we didn't stop there. Device classifications also include alternate names listed in the Nice Voice user guide to try to capture how end users might refer to these devices. Turn on the kitchen ceiling lights and turn off the kitchen cans could be controlling the same loads. Naming your thermostats logically will of course avoid confusion, but there is logic built into Nice Voice where climate can be determined by voice input device and thermostat locations. When a user makes a climate request without specifying the thermostat name, Nice Voice will look to see if there's a thermostat in the voice interface's current location, and if not, will look for a thermostat on the same floor, and outward from there, and execute against what it considers to be the most logical climate device. With proper configuration of voice input devices and thermostat locations, invoking a thermostat by its display name should not be necessary. In media, a location is typically a media zone, which usually represents a physical room or region, configured in the Media tab. As an example for Nice Voice, watch Netflix in the kitchen. But with Nice Voice, you can even address levels or floors that contain media zones. For example, play dinner jazz on the second floor. We'll play that content in all capable zones on the second floor. Media sources can be summoned by display name and location, but note that source selection is just that. It enables the source, but may not necessarily choose content to play. To go right to media content, look at using source favorites and our voice-ready driver favorites. Source favorites are located on the selected source in the Favorites tab and can be updated on a per interface basis via the gear icon on that tab. Source favorites can include anything from TV channels to streaming media favorites, and it takes you right to the content you want. It's highly recommended that source favorite names, especially long TV channel names, be edited in the viewer so recall by voice is easier and more reliable. Further, a dealer can rename these channels ahead of time in Config V2 so an end user doesn't have to. Some sources are what we refer to as nice voice ready drivers, such as our Autonomic Premium driver and our new Roku driver. Each have favorites set in the driver that can be invoked via voice without the need to make them source favorites first. More nice voice ready drivers coming soon, but in the meantime, source favorites can be used to get you to most of your media content quickly via tap and voice. UIX, or User Interface Extension, was introduced in Core 8.8 to extend the surveillance experience to the big screen while keeping fine-tuned navigation and control on the HR40 in your hand. Consider setting your Zone TV as the default for viewing video and NVR output when invoked via voice, instead of viewing them on your HR40 screen. Go to Config V2 Interface, select your HR40, Nice Voice, Use TV by Default checkbox. With this option checked, you can just say into the HR40 watch with your camera name or just the camera name to automatically send the feed to your video display. Note that users can still manually navigate to the video tab on the HR40 to see video and NVR if desired. An extremely powerful customization option for voice are voice trigger phrases and responses. When a custom phrase is heard, Nice Voice will execute any event map and also include a custom voice response if desired. First, we'll set up a voice trigger phrase in the event mapper. I'll add a new phrase called Good Morning, with the phrase to look for, which will also be Good Morning. Next, I'll set up an event map to run when that phrase is spotted. I'll just have Nice Voice turn on some lights. All right, let's test it out. Hey Milo, good morning. By default, your voice interface will use the Recognize Request sound set on that interface. But what if you wanted a different response? A custom response from Nice Voice. You can add a custom voice response to the event map. This text-to-speech response will override the user's default Recognize Request setting on the interface using the defined male or female voice. All right, let's test it out again. Hey Milo, good morning.
Good morning, buddy.
Let's do another one. This time we'll be using tokens from the messaging tab. First, we'll set up a voice trigger phrase. I'll add a new phrase called popcorn with the phrase popcorn. Next, we'll set up an event map to run when that phrase is spotted. In this example, I only want to trigger a custom voice response, but we'll make use of tokens from the messaging tab. The time is, with the time token, exactly. Let's test it out. Hey Milo, popcorn.
The time is 3:18 p.m. exactly.
Note that in 8.9, the voice response will be routed to the voice trigger event input device, the HR40 or ITP that receives the utterance. So a voice trigger event must be present for voice response playback.